Good morning and welcome to Rising. We just have a fantastic show for you today on this Monday morning. Good to be back in the seat with Niall Stanage. Hello, Niall. How was your weekend?
It was very good, Robby. It was quite quiet, relaxed, but the Irish soccer team won a key victory in the last seconds of a game yesterday, so I was excited about that.
Well, that is exciting.
That is exciting. How was your weekend?
It was good. Lots of fun and friends and parties. I actually have a friend who's moving to Pakistan, so we had a going away party for him. He works for the State Department.
That's very dramatic.
And Friendsgivings and all sorts of other things. So good weekend.
Fantastic. Looking forward to the show today?
Yes, I am. Let's get to it.
Absolutely. Coming up on Rising, President Trump has made a complete 180 on the Epstein files, writing in a Truth Social post last night that they should be released.
Plus, comedian Bill Maher went off on New York City Mayor-elect, Zoran Mamdani, and spoke about the dangers of socialism.
And podcaster Tim Dillon blasted President Trump for his position on H-1B visas and allowing Chinese students into US universities. But first, before all that, Robby, let's get started. What is on your radar?
Let's get to it. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene is speaking out after President Donald Trump denounced her as a traitor to him and to the MAGA movement. This spectacular breakup between the president and one of his closest allies took place last week, with Trump writing on Truth Social, "I am withdrawing my support and endorsement of Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene of the great state of Georgia. I understand that wonderful conservative people are thinking about primarying Marjorie in her district of Georgia, that they too are fed up with her and her antics. And if the right person runs, they will have my complete and unyielding support." She has gone far left, even doing The View with their low IQ Republican-hating anchors. Thank you for your attention to this matter. If that wasn't clear enough, the president also wrote, "Marjorie Traitor Greene is a disgrace to our great Republican Party." Harsh words for a woman who personifies the very spirit of America First, whose only crime is occasionally disagreeing with the president when she thinks that he's gone astray from pursuing the policies of America First. Now, Greene appeared on CNN over the weekend and explained how Trump calling her a traitor was hurtful and untrue. Let's watch.
His remarks, of course, have been hurtful. However, I have something in my heart that I think is incredibly important for our country, and that is to end the toxic fighting in politics. And this has been going on for years, and it has divided our country, split up friends and families, neighbors, and it's not solving our problems. The most hurtful thing he said, which is absolutely untrue, is he called me a traitor, and that is so extremely wrong. And those are the types of words used that can radicalize people against me and put my life in danger.
MTG goes on to note that Trump's anger toward her is really solely based on her support for releasing more files related to convicted sex predator Jeffrey Epstein. Watch this.
I stand with these women. I stand with rape victims. I stand with children who are in terrible sex abuse situations, and I stand with survivors of trafficking and those that are trapped in sex trafficking. And I will not apologize for that. I believe the country deserves transparency in these files, and I don't believe that rich, powerful people should be protected if they have done anything wrong.
MTG notes, as I have, that we've no reason to believe Trump himself is implicated by the files. None of the victims of Epstein have implicated Trump in bad behavior, and the late Virginia Giuffre, the most notable of Epstein's many victims, explicitly acquitted Trump. But that's what makes Trump's opposition to greater disclosure so confusing. It makes it look like he does have something to hide. That's why Democrats are having a field day with this, even though the party clearly has no real interest in getting to the bottom of the Epstein issue, a few principled figures like Ro Khanna aside. MTG has also been sounding the alarm about the administration failing to pay sufficient attention to the issue of affordability. She knows it's still the economy, stupid. That widespread frustration over Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party's ignorant economic policies is what returned Trump to power. That's the main thing. Republicans need to be laser focused on lowering the costs of food and housing and childcare for all Americans. Unfortunately, all too often the administration is getting lost in the weeds and is implementing national security measures, immigration crackdowns, tariffs that Sure, maybe they are justifiable for other reasons, but they do not and will not make things more affordable for Americans. On the contrary, tariffs are just taxes, and the mass deportation of workers also raises costs. MTG understands that. Even Trump understands that to some extent. As I explained in my radar last week, Trump was absolutely right when he schooled Laura Ingraham on H-1B visas, explaining that we need to import high-skilled South Korean workers to the U.S. if we want to actually build the factories here. America First doesn't mean zero engagement with the rest of the world on trade and immigration. How could it? You can put your family first without committing to building all of your own furniture or growing all of your own food. A little bit of common sense economics would really help the Republican Party out of a tough spot right now, even as the Democratic Party seems inclined to fully pivot to Zohran Mamdani-style socialism and central planning, which will immiserate Americans. But back to MTG. I also want to salute her for the expert way in which she handled the mainstream media. CNN tried to trap her. Dana Bash asked MTG if she was so bothered by Trump's rhetoric toward her, why has she never spoken out against toxic rhetoric in the past? Here's how MTG responded.
I'm only responsible for myself and my own words and actions, and I am committed, and I've been working on this a lot lately, to put down the knives in politics. I really just want to see people be kind to one another, and we need to figure out a new path forward that is focused on the American people, because as Americans, no matter what side of the aisle we're on, we have far more in common than we have differences. Yeah. And we need to be able to respect each other with our disagreements.
Now, those are admirable sentiments. We can disagree with each other very passionately without wanting each other dead, obviously. We can hate each other's very bad or incorrect policy ideas without hating particular people. It is incumbent on everyone, right, left, and center, to bring down the level of toxicity in our political discourse and to assume good faith whenever possible, though we cannot use the threat of toxic discourse as an excuse to engage in censorship, as MTG makes clear. Now, sometimes free speech is messy, and it's unpolite, and it's uncivil, and that's simply the consequence of living in a free society, where people who disagree stridently are allowed to do so and to engage in persuasion in order to make this country a better place. The political rhetoric is very nice and polite in authoritarian countries because there isn't any.
Good stuff, Robby.
Thank you.
So I think that one of the curious things about the whole toxic rhetoric issue here is Trump branding Marjorie Taylor Greene a traitor. And she says that that has elicited threats toward her, including, I think in specific terms, a threat of a pipe bombing against her business. Now, firstly, just that rhetoric isn't helpful or useful to start off with. But secondly, to me, it points out how much the Republican Party has just become a party of Trump, because nothing that Marjorie Taylor Greene is advocating for is different than the supposed MAGA agenda. Right. She is very much aligned with Trump, or what were assumed to be Trump's beliefs about non-interventionism, about immigration, about issues like that. And it is the fact that she has broken with him on the Epstein thing that seems to have elicited this enormous anger. And I think that's just part of a bigger picture where the Republican Party is so much in his thrall.
Right. Maybe it's personal. Trump has suggested that it was because he dissuaded her from running for either Senate or governor of Georgia. She said on TV in this CNN interview that was absolutely not true, that they never had a conversation about that. So then CNN said, so are you saying Trump is lying about it? And she said, well, maybe he was misinformed about it by advisors that I was considering that. I say I was never considering it. Maybe there's some actual personal disagreement going on there. But yeah, the broader lesson is, and I'm not even sure I would say, you shouldn't, it's wrong to call her a traitor. She's not a traitor to America, certainly. She's not even a traitor to the Republican Party. She's doing what she thinks is right. She's doing what she thinks is in the best interest of the Republican Party. I don't know that calling someone a traitor is like necessarily inviting violence on them. Well, even though I generally agree with her, I kind of balked at her saying that that's akin to inviting attacks on my person.
Well, I don't know. I mean, if you're a patriotic American who supports Trump and he labels someone a traitor, the implication is that the action should be taken against that person, right? I mean, you can argue whether he means individuals should go after or not, but calling someone a traitor is very different from expressing vigorous disagreement with them in one way or another.
I'm not sure she had me sold on that point. But a lot of the other things she had to say I obviously agree with, and I think it will be unhealthy on the right to be litigating actual policy disagreements as personality disagreements, and that will be to the Democratic Party's advantage if Republicans go down this route.
I agree with that point. Coming up, Michelle Obama says that America is not ready for a female president, and she reveals whether she has political ambitions herself. Stick with us, we'll be right back with that.
Do you think that impacts the room that we've made for a woman to be president?
Well, as we saw in this past election, sadly, we ain't ready. That's why I'm like, don't even look at me about running, because you all are lying. You're not ready for a woman. You are not. So don't waste my time.
Michelle Obama dropping that comment during a recent event in New York to promote her new book and effectively killing any speculation that she may launch a bid for the White House despite consistent support among Democrats. The former First Lady went on to elaborate on why she believes America isn't ready for a woman president.
You know, we got a lot of growing up to do, and there's still, sadly, a lot of men who do not feel like they can be led by a woman, and we saw it. I think we still have growing to do in that regard, and you know, we can see how progress can be made and things can be snatched back.
Some may call that a pessimistic take, but there's some data to suggest that Mrs. Obama may be onto something. An American university survey from September shows of the 800 or so US voters polled, 40% say they personally know someone who wouldn't vote for a woman for president. That same survey showed about a quarter of voters trusted men more on issues like crime, national security, and global affairs. 31% say they believe men are more able to make tough decisions on national security.
Well, I know you're very disappointed to learn that Michelle Obama has no aspirations for the presidency since you are such a fan.
I'm a big Michelle Obama fan. I'm aware she has no aspirations for the presidency because I would have liked her to run on previous cycles, and she had no interest in doing so. I think she was the only person who could have beaten Hillary Clinton in 2016 or Joe Biden in 2020 for the Democratic nomination. Yeah,
the Obamas are clearly still interested in engaging in commentary. They make speeches. Michelle has her podcast. Barack Obama fundraises. He does things on behalf of Democrats, but they're not interested in being more involved in that. I think Michelle Obama, even less than Barack Obama, is interested in that. Where she skipped, there was widespread speculation. There was even speculation of trouble in their marriage because she wasn't there for the inauguration or Jimmy Carter's funeral, which it doesn't seem like they have any trouble, or who knows, but it was more of her not wanting to do the official functions of state. So she's kind of over it, which is fine. She has every right to do that. I mean, George W. Bush is also over taking an active role in commentary on politics. That was kind of the norm, or has been the norm for the last few decades of presidents once their time is done. Obviously, in our history, there are examples of Taft went on to be Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. John Quincy Adams served in the House of Representatives after being president, but those kinds of things are few and far between.
Right. Look, I think that the key point here is her argument that the United States won't elect a woman as president. And to my mind, I think two things can be true at one time, right? A female candidate can be a flawed candidate and can have weaknesses like anyone else does. I think that Hillary Clinton was a particularly bad candidate and have always thought that. I don't think Hillary Clinton is politically gifted. And at the same time, there can be sexism or misogyny at work that make people reluctant to vote for a woman as president. Those figures we cited in the introduction, where 40% of people in that American university poll felt that they knew someone who wouldn't vote for a female candidate as president, that's pretty shocking to me, in my opinion.
Well, okay, yes, but that's impressions of how other people's views might be. Also, we elect women to all sorts of offices all over the country. We just haven't elected one to president. What I think is going on is that in case, I mean, this is very true, for instance, in the case of Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris was picked to be vice president for a DEI type rationale, for diversity reasons. It's important to us to have a black woman. Joe Biden made that promise based on things that the media pressed him to do. Will you pledge to do that? I actually thought Bernie Sanders handled that better. Bernie Sanders said something it comes to the same effect, but slightly different. He said, well, I'm going to pick the most qualified person, but among the qualified people I'm considering, there's a tremendous number of black and female candidates, and I'm very likely to pick one of them. Whereas Joe Biden said it slightly different in the more, yes, of course I'm picking a black woman because it's important to black people and to women to have a black woman, even if black women don't necessarily identify with the politics of this specific one I have in mind. So because Kamala Harris was boosted to that level for that reason, and then she underperformed because she didn't actually have this resonating with voters, I think it could then look like a female candidate is less likely to win, when it was really a female candidate is more, I would say a mediocre candidate who is female is more likely to be elevated to a position they wouldn't have attained without any of those considerations, rather than actually being, I mean, Italy has an Italian prime minister, Japan has an Italian, I don't think our society is more, has more backward about women in leadership positions than Japan or Italy, frankly. So I think it's something else going on.
Yeah, look, I mean, as I say, I think there are...
I say that as a proud Italian, so I can slam my people.
I think there are various different components to it, and I do agree. I mean, that Kamala Harris example that you cited and the way it was presented gets to the opposition to, affirmative action that Clarence Thomas has, for example, raised, which is he feels, I think, that the existence of those kinds of programs or measures actually casts an aspersion on the achievements made by black people or women or other minority groups. That is a bigger debate in a sense. I will say, as far as like our society and how it works, one of the interesting things in the exit polls last time around was Latino men moved against the Democratic Party by a significantly bigger margin than Latina women did. Yes. Now, that just points out to the fact that this isn't just old white man won't vote for a woman.
Right. No.
There are other complexities around that issue, for sure.
Very much so. Very much so. It is interesting. And yeah, it might be, and again, even a slight disadvantage on this basis would be catastrophic because we have close elections. And these elections are going to be decided by a couple thousand voters in 2 states.
Yeah, so and if you lose 1% here or there, that can be game over.
You're absolutely cooked. Up next, Laura Loomer, one of our favorite people, bashing Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend and wants his press pass revoked. Don't go anywhere. Close Trump ally Laura Loomer was bashing Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend, Brian Glenn, over the weekend.
Amid Greene's feud with President Trump, Glenn posted 4 pictures of the couple on X, writing, "I love this woman. I love this country. God bless America." Greene responded to the post, writing, "I love you, Brian Glenn TV."
Loomer then attacked both of them in some posts of her own. Glenn is the White House correspondent for Real America's Voice, a conservative media company. Loomer wrote in part on X, quote, "I think it's time for Caroline Leavitt to revoke the press pass of Brian Glenn, the boyfriend of Marjorie Traitor Greene. All he does is ask questions to make himself the story, like asking Zelensky about his suit. What value does that have? It provides 0 news value." Loomer then insulted Greene's appearance and said she was, quote, falsely accusing President Trump of being a pedophile and is spewing Islamo-commie talking points like there is no Sharia law and that Trump is endangering her life by calling her out for her lies. Having her boyfriend in the White House is a liability for President Trump. It's honestly so disrespectful to President Trump.
Glenn simply responded by telling Loomer, quote, "Shut up," expletive. Look, Laura Loomer, I mean, I just don't, it seems to me she just has no baseline of decency at all, and she will just attack people on any grounds, however spurious or however personally vicious, and, sometimes assail them with kind of innuendo or just false allegations. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you've ever met her. I certainly have not, but she seems a very imbalanced
I
person.
I've certainly been at events where she is. I also saw her on the street the other day.
Oh, didn't go and say hi?
I think she was scooting past me. I don't mean to cause, don't want me to accused of threatening violence on. I'm not telling you where it was or anything.
Sure.
Somewhere in the District of Columbia. She has said a number of very, very mean things about a lot of people I like, from Thomas Massie to Marjorie Taylor Greene, which is fine. Everybody has thick skin; they can handle it. I don't like the role she's playing in terms of policing who gets to be in the administration, who should be there, and who shouldn't be. She has a very particular agenda. I would say she's in the national populist category for the most part, except she's extremely hawkish on foreign policy, which, like, she's kind of in a Bannon wing, but then she's totally not with him on, she wanted to strike Iran, she wants to destroy Palestine, she's totally for Israel. So she has that difference of opinion with Marjorie Taylor Greene, but then she's accusing Marjorie Taylor Greene of wanting or not being sufficiently worked up about Sharia law. I mean, you criticized Marjorie Taylor Greene when we interviewed her. You asked her a tough question about her tweeting a meme of Sharia law overtaking New York City because of Mamdani.
Right.
So it's funny that you scrutinized Marjorie Taylor Greene for that, and Laura Loomer saying she's not
Islamophobic enough.
It's just
it's crazy to make that accusation about Greene. I think I should say as well, Real America's Voice, which is Brian Glenn's network, I frankly don't consider a legitimate news organization. That being said,
because it's so anti-Trump, right?
I mean, it's the most pro-Trump network it is possible to be. It's essentially a propaganda network. But I do give Glenn dues for standing by her in such emphatic a way. You could say maybe he has no real choice, but that is not going to help him in his career for a network that has a hugely pro-Trump audience. And I thought it was good of him to just be so emphatic.
No one who possesses a shred of decency or moral fiber is going to attack or should attack their spouse or partner or their family or their parents or their children, and I'm not going to respect you if you do.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
That's just the case.
Very, very overly personalized, and I think it just points to these kind of weird schisms that are breaking out all over the MAGA movement, where people are, Loomer in particular, but we were just talking about Trump's criticisms of Marjorie Taylor Greene. It's all got very, very personal and really pretty vicious.
I would just warn Laura that there, but for the grace of God goes she. You could easily, because she is so idiosyncratic and so she is making so many enemies consciously by her desire to be at war with everyone, she has Trump's favor for now, but you could easily see her landing in the sort of position that Marjorie Taylor Greene finds herself in now.
Indeed you could. Next up, I will be discussing how President Trump suddenly feels differently about releasing the Epstein files. Stick around.
Welcome back to Rising. Niall, what is in your notes today?
Today, we're looking at a new development in the matter of the Epstein files, a development that happened last night, when Donald Trump waved the white flag and tried to call it a victory. As we all know, Trump has spent months trying to quash full disclosure of the files for mysterious reasons. Republican Congresswoman Lauren Boebert, who supports disclosure, was summoned to the White House Situation Room just last week for a meeting. But, credit where it's due, Boebert stood firm. And the same goes for Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, who Trump twice called a traitor over the weekend. Greene says threats of violence, including a specific threat of a pipe bombing, followed. Greene says that Trump's quote, unwarranted and vicious attacks against me were a dog whistle to dangerous radicals that could lead to serious attacks on me and my family. We wish her safety, of course. Trump's opposition to disclosure has also featured ferocious personal attacks as well as slimy innuendos against Congressman Thomas Massie. Massie is the Republican who has spearheaded the drive for a vote in the House of Representatives, along with his Democratic colleague Ro Khanna. Now, yet after all that, the GOP was willing to defy Trump, a rare occasion indeed. The party's leaders on Capitol Hill were bracing for dozens of Republican defections in a final vote on the Epstein files. Massie predicted 100 Republicans could take his side. So Trump, staring defeat in the face, turned tail. Me against the files being released? Where'd you get that idea? That was the general gist when he tweeted, or rather Truth Social, that, quote, House Republicans should vote to release the Epstein files because we have nothing to hide and it's time to move on from this Democrat hoax perpetrated by radical left lunatics in order to deflect from the great success of the Republican Party, including our recent victory on the Democrat shutdown. That's what he wrote on Truth Social last night. Incredible stuff. Again, let's tip our collective hats to Massie and Taylor Greene and Boebert and even Nancy Mace, the 4 Republicans who stood up to Trump over Epstein at real risk and won. As for the president, maybe the combination of inevitable defeat in the vote and widespread public mockery of his ridiculous stance became just too much to take. Here's part of the cold open from NBC's Saturday Night Live at the weekend.
Jeffrey Epstein, I barely knew the guy, okay, as evidenced by the thousands of pictures of us together dancing and grinding our teeth at various parties, always leering and pointing at something just off camera, probably a book we're excited to read.
The Trump impersonator there. Now, of course, it's good that Trump has finally lifted his opposition to releasing the files. Let's see them. But will we? I hope he's not just playing games. Because you see, on Friday, right before Trump made his U-turn, he called on the Department of Justice to begin investigating some people who are mentioned in the Epstein documents. Not himself, of course, and not any other Republican either. The only individuals he named were Bill Clinton, Clinton's former Treasury Secretary, Larry Summers, and Democratic mega-donor Reid Hoffman. All 3 deny wrongdoing, just as Trump himself does. But the problem here isn't just Trump once again ordering the Justice Department to go after his enemies, or even Attorney General Pam Bondi's meek compliance. It's also the danger that all of this is just a tactic. It could be that even after Congress votes, Trump and Bondi turn around and say, well, you see, these files are now part of an open investigation. We can't release them after all. Sorry. That would be extremely cynical, but this is Trump we're talking about. So the extremely cynical is extremely possible. It's not just me expressing this fear, it's also Thomas Massie himself. Here he is on ABC's This Week yesterday.
The president's been saying this is a hoax. He's been saying that for months. Well, he's just now decided to investigate a hoax, if it's a hoax. And I have another concern about these investigations that he's announced. If they have ongoing investigations in certain areas, those documents can't be released. So this might be a big smokescreen, these investigations, to open a bunch of them as a last-ditch effort to prevent the release of the Epstein files.
Trump didn't take kindly to the suggestion of a smokescreen. Here he is being asked about Massie's comments last night.
Mr. President, Representative Massie says he's concerned that the Epstein probe you are calling for could be a smokescreen to block the release of more files. Is that the case?
Well, I don't want to talk about it because fake news like you're a terrible reporter, and fake news like you, they just keep bringing that up to deflect from the tremendous success of the Trump administration.
Who's actually doing the deflecting here? The increasingly tiresome attacks on the fake news are obviously intended to deflect Trump supporters from noticing that he didn't actually answer the question. Let's not kid ourselves. Yes, it's good that Trump has been forced to bend in the face of pressure. It's very good that Republicans were willing to stand up to him for once, and that the House is set to vote. But there are still plenty of hurdles to be cleared before we get to see the files. Let's believe it when we see it.
Very good stuff, Niall. I share Massie's concern absolutely that starting new investigations into individuals who I think we would learn more, frankly, about what, for instance, Larry Summers was up to, and some of it looks quite bad from the emails that have been released. Yucky, not bad in any kind of criminal sense.
Right.
I think we would learn by just having the files released at this point. Another investigation that's going to generate more documents that we don't get access to, I'm sick of it. I don't want it. This is flashbacks, massive flashbacks to the effort to release COVID origins investigations. Remember, this was something that Congress voted for and Joe Biden signed, that we would make public all the information about that the government has about where COVID came from. And instead, all we got was basically a press release summarizing that, well, these are the government agencies that think it came from a lab. I know which ones think it came from a lab. I want to know why they reached that conclusion. I want to know the specific information. For example, I can think of a number of things that would cause them to conclude that. They have evidence of people getting sick in that lab predating the initial wet market event, right? Or any confirmed cases of COVID prior to the wet market event makes it, okay, it's a lab. That's a smoking gun, especially if you have flu in that lab itself. Or that military Olympics team or whatever that was there that got sick, something like that. That would be information. That's what I want to know. I don't want to know what the FBI thinks. I already know what they think. Sorry to derail the conversation, but it's like that. I don't want a summary. I don't want a summary of the investigation documents. I want the documents themselves. That's what they should be voting to release. And there is a very real fear that this new investigation could block this. Trump is now taking the position he clearly should have taken from the get-go, that J.D. Vance and Kash Patel and so many other senior administration officials promised, which was to release them. And if it's going to look bad for certain people, I think it's just you're making it look worse, because now all eyes are on these things, when you could have argued that a much smaller subset of MAGA people are all who cared now. Now the Democrats, I think they care about it for cynical reasons, but their base, the base didn't know what Jeffrey Epstein scandal was. Now the base knows, and the mainstream media will be covering it more aggressively.
Yeah, look, Trump has put an enormous cloud of suspicion over himself by his resistance to having these released. Had he come out with this kind of statement at the start, he could have kind of lanced the boil, assuming, of course, that there isn't anything catastrophic in the files, which, this is where the suspicion
Can you imagine
comes from.
Catastrophic emerging about Trump at this point anyway? A man who's been accused of sexual misconduct a number of, and I'm not saying this as an anti-Trump partisan or something, but his enemies have put forth numerous things that they consider disqualifying. I hesitate to imagine. He himself has said, and he's correct, I could shoot someone on some street in New York and no one would care. Like, there's something to that. I can't imagine what would be catastrophic enough to actually doom his presidency.
Maybe. I'm getting flashbacks now to many decades ago. A governor of Louisiana said he was so far ahead in his race for re-election that the only thing that could derail him was a dead girl or a live boy being discovered in his bed. So maybe we're in that kind of category, but I don't know.
No, we're in an intersectional, post-woke time where that doesn't
matter. We shall see.
We shall see. Coming up, Bill Maher went off on Zohran Mamdani over his socialist policies and pleaded with Democrats to embrace moderate candidates. Stay with us.
Democrats must recognize that Zohran Mamdani is the future of the party. Unfortunately, it's the Republican Party. If you missed his victory speech in last week's mayoral election in New York, don't worry. You'll see it in every attack ad for the next 2 years.
Bill Maher there slamming future New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani for embracing socialism during his campaign.
The 34-year-old mayor-elect ran on the Democratic ticket, but is a self-proclaimed Democratic socialist, something that Maher suggests cannot be the future of the Democratic Party if they plan to win elections in the future.
Before the whole left side of the country catches socialism fever, let's listen to the other big winner in last Tuesday's election, Virginia Governor-elect Abigail Spanberger, who, before the 24 election, said things like, if the party didn't shift to the center, we will get torn apart. And we need to never use the word socialist or socialism ever again. Well, she was right, but they didn't listen. Typical, am I right, ladies?
Maher says this isn't a one-off either. Take a listen to what he said next.
This isn't rocket science. All the left-leaning think tanks have done autopsies on 2024, and they all came up with the same message: move to the center. Even the New York Times, which did so much to promote woke politics, now says the partisans are wrong. Moving to the center is the way to win. And Democrats should recognize the party moved too far left on social issues after Obama left office. Gosh, if only someone had been saying that all along.
Maher did later point out that the US already has prime examples of socialist policy like Social Security, Medicare and Medicaid. But he says while those programs to, quote, soften the edges of capitalism, one of the real dangers of socialism is the woke ideology that he says comes with it. Take a listen.
DSA are radicals about this concept, and radical economic policy is always ineluctably married to radical social policy. Their platform, for example, calls for completely open borders. You think you're going to win an election on that? This just seems like more extremism at a time when Americans are begging both parties, please, could just one of you act normal?
So what I find, I know you don't care for Bill Maher. What I find interesting about this clip is that he sounds to be like he's mostly criticizing extremely progressive left social policies, and despite socialism having the word social in it, actually the policies that are defining of socialism are mostly economic in nature rather than, right, he's criticizing wokeness, but what we call wokeness or political correctness is a newer innovation in progressive thought than socialism, which was just about economic policies. Now, maybe you can argue there's some connection, and that's kind of what he's arguing there. But now, I also think socialism is very bad. I think the Democratic Socialists of America have not demonstrated themselves to be a particularly wise or politically influential, or have grasped onto some political knowledge other than the clear success of a Bernie Sanders type figure. AOC, those people who, but they're very, they define socialism in just this vague way such that no one can be against it, which at that point then I'm like, well, why are you then trying to even rehabilitate the term? If what you're going to say is, by socialism, I mean some protections for workers and some welfare programs. Well, yes, we have welfare. European countries have welfare, and they're not socialist countries. To me, socialism, and not just to me because it's the actual definition, socialism is a economic system is a competitive system, an alternative system for a market economy, where the economy is centrally managed and directed by a group of, in pure socialist thought, the workers take the means of production. In practice, what that always means is some government committee plans the economy and decides how many what gets built and what factory opens and what you charge for it, and that leads to crippling poverty every single time. But it's not a market economy with welfare. That's just social democracy.
So we could have a whole debate about whether what you just described is socialism or Marxism and how those intersect, but
Marxism is nonsense. You got to agree with me on that one.
I'm not a Marxist, Rob. I'm not a Marxist,
yes.
So let's be clear about that. But to the Bill Maher point, one of the reasons that you correctly note that he irritates me quite a lot is that his fundamental view is that whatever he happens to believe is the way forward for Democrats to win elections. In the New York mayoral election, there was a candidate espousing exactly what Bill Maher is espousing. His name was Andrew Cuomo, and he got kicked around by the voters twice, both in the Democratic primary and in the general election.
New York.
In New York, yes. But we're not, nobody is saying, like, this idea about for example, a centrally directed economy and so on. Mamdani isn't even in New York commending or advocating a centrally planned economy. He's talking about free childcare for kids 5 and under, free buses, financed by a modest increase in the corporate tax rate and an even more modest increase in the city income tax rate for people whose income is over $1 million. That obviously has support, otherwise he would not be the mayor-elect of New York City. Bill Maher also, I'm sorry to get into a rant, but he really does irk me in all sorts of ways. Bill Maher, for example, espouses and has espoused throughout the past 2 years extremely strong support for Israel and what it's doing in Gaza. Lots of people on the left and increasing numbers of people on the right are appalled by that. It is an unpopular policy at this point to have the views that he holds. Will he ever admit that? No chance he'll ever admit that. So, Bill Maher frustrates me quite a lot.
I agree that the foreign policy views he espouses are out of step with the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, frankly. But I mean, I think his point on what would be generally helpful for electing more Democrats is probably correct in the sense that states like Virginia or Arizona or Pennsylvania that are generally up for grabs are going to be places where, but I don't know, it gets more complicated because an economically populist message is to some extent a message Republicans have themselves adopted. Now, I don't think it depends what we mean by economic populism. Again, I think free markets are better, free trade is better. I want to have lower taxes and less regulation. I'm not going to abolish welfare tomorrow. We can have welfare, it's fine. In fact, I'd rather have more welfare and less regulation, as I've made clear in many of our recent conversations. Yep. I would rather have more welfare and less central planning. The Trump administration, apart from its tech policy, which is a completely hands-off, Reagan-esque 1980s style free market libertarian wet dream, its tech policy is that. Its other industrial policies and economic policies have been broadly way too protectionist for my measures. But that combination might be popular.
Just briefly on that point, Rob, because I know we're almost out of time. I do think that part of the appeal of Bernie Sanders, of AOC, of Mamdani, beyond their geographical constituencies, is that they share with a great proportion of the population unhappiness with the status quo, the belief that the system is rigged against regular people. And I think one of the problems the Democratic Party has had, particularly in last year's election, was the idea that it was, in a sense, defending the status quo. And that was a very unpopular thing to be doing.
Well, one side or the other always has to defend the status quo because one side or the other has to represent the status quo.
Well, maybe the Republicans will be the status quo next time around.
Yep.
Up next, Tim Dillon didn't hold back in criticising President Trump, even saying that this was, quote, the end of his administration. What's all that about? Find out and stay with us after this. Comedian and podcaster Tim Dillon let loose on President Trump during a recent podcast.
Dillon was discussing Trump defending H-1B visas during an interview with Fox host Laura Ingraham. Here's the comedian.
This is the end of the Trump administration. This is the beginning of the lame duck presidency. It's obvious to everyone, even his most ardent supporters show up to the White House, like Laura Ingraham, and she's kind of shocked on what the hell's going on. Now we'll start, 3 years of talking about the ballroom. He will trail off. He will get older. He's adorned the White House in gold. Epstein's going to suck the oxygen out of a lot of this.
Dillon then played this clip of the president's interview with Ingraham.
You've said as many as 600,000 Chinese students could come to the United States. Why, sir, is that a pro-MAGA position when so many American kids want to go to school and there are places not for them and these universities are getting rich off Chinese money?
We also have a massive system of colleges and universities. And if we were to cut that in half, which perhaps makes some people happy, you would have half the colleges in the United States go out of business.
Dillon then mocked the notion that HBCUs would go out of business if it weren't for Chinese students. Let's watch that.
This is the craziest argument I've ever. Can you imagine Chinese kids coming over to go to the black college? Does anyone believe that? Does anyone believe that we're letting 400,000 Chinese students in so that they can keep black colleges going? I mean, how stupid do they think we all are? It's really getting to a point where it's kind of insane.
This is an interesting issue. I think it's a bit more complicated than the Laura Ingraham and Tim Dillon side of it were making it out to be, and also the Trump's making it out to be. And maybe there's some middle ground. I'm supportive of high-skilled immigration. I think they should come here. I think most importantly, if the Chinese students are coming here to learn and be educated in our universities, then they should stay here after. No sending them back. This is an idea that Trump himself has talked about. I agree with him completely. He's in consultation with high-powered Elon Musk-type tech people who know that we need smart Chinese and Indian students and workers in this country to build up our tech products to compete with China and other countries, and it's better if I want to drain China of talent. I want it all here. I don't want it here and then sent back after they're educated here. That makes no sense to me and is what happens under our current immigration policy. So that should be fixed. I do want them here. I'm totally against affirmative action. So when they say, well, why can't you have a white and a hardworking? No. The most qualified student should get the spot every time. I don't care if it's 100% Asian because of that. I don't care if it's 100% white. I don't care if it's 100% black. I don't care if it's 100% Jewish. I don't care. Most qualified student gets the job. Now, if it is the case that our tax dollars and our government money is propping up these universities that are then just giving the positions to foreign students, well, then now I do understand how that could be a legitimate frustration with Americans saying, well, my tax dollars go to support this institution that I can't get admitted to. That's kind of like the state university in the state of Michigan, where I'm from, and half the students are from out of state paying more in tuition, but the institution is supposed to be for people who live in Michigan. It has Michigan in the name. It's subsidized by the taxpayers. So then I get it, and my solution to that would just be to privatize these things altogether.
Briefly, I just have to push back against one thing that Dillon said. Well, I mean, I disagree with lots of it, but that kind of disparaging reference to black universities that he made, sort of, why would Chinese students, no one would think that. There are lots of excellent institutions that are HBCUs, Howard, Morehouse, Spelman, all kinds of very good universities that are HBCUs. So I don't like that derision that he expressed there. To me, the broader and bigger question here is this issue of the schisms within the MAGA coalition, because obviously things like the HB1 visas has really created a separation. There's a whole lot of issues like that. Venezuela we've talked about, etc. There does seem to be a really quite high degree of dissent within Trump's MAGA coalition in a way that I hadn't really expected at this point.
Right, because Trump seems to be taking the position that it's about immigration enforcement is about crime control, and he wants to police aggressively immigrants at the lower lower skilled labor class, where he thinks there's all this crime, and not do it at the higher level, but a lot of people in the coalition want the job competition there is very serious and want immigration dealt with there too. So it's an interesting split. That does it for us today on Rising Live. Look out for more exclusive YouTube content coming your way today, and be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hills YouTube channel so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we're now available anywhere you listen to podcasts. See you later.